If you asked me a few weeks ago about Andrew Jarecki, I would have told you about a brilliant director of powerful documentaries, Capturing the Friedmans, The Jinx, and most recently, The Alabama Solution. But if you asked me today who Andrew Jarecki is, I would tell you he's all that, and he's also a good friend. We met by chance at a small screening. When I asked him if he knew where everyone was eating afterwards, he said, "I think it's at your house, Ruthie." At 2 a.m., Andrew and I were still talking about films and family and food and friendship. Today, Andrew and I are around the table again, this time in the River Cafe. And who knows, maybe we'll be here still at 2 a.m. After all, we are good friends. There's something nice about that night, just being in a home. Do you like home, to be home rather than restaurants?
I do. I mean, I like to be home, and then I especially like to be in someone's home if it's a place that kind of expands your mind.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to people about you since we met, saying things that are obviously very effusive, and they say, "Well, how long have you known each other?" And then I feel silly saying, "Not that long."
2 weeks.
But
love at first sight. But I was going to talk about the food of Alabama because your last movie, which we did a screening last night, didn't you? How was that?
Yeah, we did a screening yesterday. The film is basically an investigative piece that took around 7 years to make because I was interested in incarceration. I was interested in how badly.
Have you ever been in prison?
I went to jail for one day because when I was a kid, there was a pilot circling around a small airport and looked like he was in trouble, and I climbed up the mini airport control tower and I turned on the runway lights. And when I came down, there were bobbies sitting there ready to arrest me. I think I was 16. And
where was this, near Rye?
it was in Tortola in the British Virgin Islands.
Oh, I see.
But anyway, I'd had the experience of being near prisons because I'd made in Capturing the Friedmans a film that included Jesse Friedman, who was sent to prison at quite a young age. And I just remember prisons being very secretive and very restrictive, and couldn't understand why it was so hard for me to interview somebody that was in a prison, that I was just being refused by the prison administration. And so I always had that in my mind. And then making the Jinx, Bob Durst was sort of the opposite. He was a guy that had all the money in the world and largely managed to keep himself out of prison, even though he'd killed a few people. And so at one point, my daughter, who was 14, Jeremy, was reading a book by a guy who had been wrongfully convicted in Alabama and had been in the system for like 30 years. And then we decided to take a road trip, and we went to Montgomery, Alabama, to sort of see what we could see. And we met a man there who was an older man. I guess he was the first black prison chaplain in the state of Alabama, appointed by George Wallace. I asked him questions about the prison system, and he very pointedly at some point said to me, "Well, if you come back and volunteer, you'll be able to see what you can see." And I said, "Well, if I come back, what will I see?" And he said, "Well, if you come back to Alabama, I'll take you on the death row at Holman Prison, and you'll see it's a slave ship." And that stayed with me. And I went back to New York and got together with Charlotte Kaufman, who I made the film with. And I said, "I think we need to go back and see what we can see." And then when we went back, we were really prevented from seeing very much in the prisons, but we discovered that there was this network of people inside the prisons who had access to contraband cell phones.
Yeah.
And that becomes a big part of what the film is, because now the men in the film can tell their story. And that I'd never seen, before. I'd never been able to hear directly from people who are currently incarcerated, not people who are saying, "Well, back in the day I was in prison," or whatever, but people who are saying, "This is what's happening to me right now," including people speaking to people who are in solitary confinement right now. But, food is very important in the film.
It is.
Because the whole reason that the chaplain gets to go into the prisons and bring his sort of religious observances there, and the reason they get such a big audience and that people in the prison really want to see him, is that he goes in and brings food. And the food in the Alabama state prison system is so bad that they literally, we have images of meat and other food that they've delivered to the prison for serving to the men that literally have the legend outside, not fit for human consumption. And so when the chaplain comes in, you know, he's got a kitchen in Montgomery. He's got a whole bunch of volunteers, and they make food for 1,200 people. And then they load it up in trucks. By the way, he doesn't get paid to do this. This is just part of his ministry. And they bring the food, and they bring them things that they otherwise would never have, and things that are luxuries, you know, like Little Debbie's, which is kind of like a Southern, you know, packaged food. Or he says, you know, I bring them ho-hos, but they also bring them roast chicken or fried chicken, and they also bring them biscuits, and they also bring them mashed potatoes. And you can see in the film that they're serving him a piece of roast chicken. And the guy we're talking to says, you know, they should show you the meat that we get. It doesn't look anything like this.
And also how food is used as an incentive to acquiesce or taking it away to make them feel punished.
In the food, you know, in the prison, because it's an economy of deprivation, food is so much more important. Right? For us, we're going to go and have dinner tonight, and we're going to be deciding how many pieces of focaccia we're going to have. For these guys, the prison is trying to manipulate them, which they often are. They'll very often just cut off the food supply. And they have such complete control over these men's lives that they'll put people in a position where they're getting very few calories to begin with. You know, they're living on a diet that consists a lot of Rice Krispie treats that they're getting out of the commissary, or ramen. And I think you have a population that's sort of unhealthy and not able to become healthier because they can't get access. And that's one of the reasons why you see people that have been in prison for 20 years have a lot of trouble staying alive as long as other people do, because they've spent years being malnourished.
And how long did it take you? 7 years?
Yeah.
Why did it take so long? Was it
I think, first of all, it takes me a long time to make a film. And I think it's partly because, you know, we're trying to get to the essence of a very complicated problem and trying to convey it in a very simple way relative to the problem. I always have a blackboard in wherever I have an office. I always have an old-fashioned blackboard. And at the very beginning of this, I wrote up this mnemonic device that was Smit-Wit Nose. And I said to the team that was working on the film, I said, this stands for how do we not make the saddest movie in the world that no one ever sees? And we had a strategy for how to do that. It kind of makes you just, I don't know, motivates me. And when I talk to the men who are inside, you know, I got to talk to Kinetic Justice, Robert Earl Counsel, who is such an important part of the film. I feel like I'm talking to Mandela. I feel like I'm talking to somebody who's not only incredibly resilient and is a model of resilience in the face of authoritarian power, but is somebody who is able to motivate others, is able to lead, you know, is so thoughtful and so inspiring. One of the ways that the men respond to this horrible brutality that's happening in the prison system is they go on strike. They say, we're not going to do free work anymore in the prison until we have conditions that are livable. And the way that the administration responds to that is by cutting off the food supply. And they're not supposed to do that. It's not legal. You can't have somebody who you have total control over and then just stop feeding them because you're killing them. But that's exactly what they did in Alabama. They did what's called bird feeding, which is they put just enough food in the plate that it kind of seems like they're feeding somebody something, but it might just be a piece of white bread and a string bean. And it's, you know, sending a message that you're not getting fed until you do what we say. And the other inspiring thing is you see that the men have, before the strike happens, they've all gone to whatever sources of food they had, right? So they've taken whatever little money they've had and they've bought all the Rice Krispie treats or all the ramen
Oreo
that
cookies.
they can.
Remember one of them said they got an Oreo cookie for breakfast.
And then they share those. And that's a beautiful thing, right? That people who are in this economy of deprivation where they really don't have access to anything much, that those people are sharing resources with each other. One of the things that you learn, I think, or learn about in the film is what happens when you have authoritarian power. You have complete power over a population, which is obviously what's happening in a number of countries in the world right now, as you have these sort of dictatorial leaders. And when you have total control, including control over whether somebody can eat or not, or what they eat, you really are infiltrating every aspect of their life and personality. And one of the things that's inspiring about the men in this film, who somehow, after years and years and years of deprivation and after years of abuse, are still somehow optimistic, are still willing to engage in a work strike, for example, that's a peaceful protest, even though their peaceful protests are always met with violence by the authorities. You, I think, take a lot of heart in that.
What was your home like growing up? What was home? Where was home?
I sort of lived between Manhattan and Westchester County, Rye, New York. And my mom was a huge part of our upbringing. My parents have been together since they were 16, and they're now both 92.
Wow.
They met on the Wolverine, the train that goes from New York to Michigan. And they both, back in the day, they would skip you grades if you were doing well in school. So they both skipped 2 grades, and they went to University of Michigan when they connected on the train and then stayed together in one form or another for a very long time.
Yeah.
But my dad was a big kind of world beater, getting out there and, slaying dragons and things. And my mom was definitely the one who had the responsibility and thrill of raising me and my brothers. My grandparents came to America, I think, with my dad when he was around 5 years old. And they had a very large business in Germany. I think they had the largest shipping lines in Germany, called Kunstmann. And they had hundreds of ships, and all the ships were named for the kids in the family. And then from one day to the next, almost, they became Nazi warships. And they moved to America. And they came here in around 1937.
1937. Yeah, that's when my husband's family came from Italy for the same reasons.
Yeah.
Suddenly they were Trieste Jews, and were suddenly,
Yeah.
Did they bring? And your grandparents? So did they bring their food with them? Did they live near you?
Well, first of all, I'm a giant fan of Italian food, and my dad grew up, I guess, on German food.
Yeah.
So for me, I have a difficulty with German food.
Let's talk about German food. What is German food?
Somebody said to me recently, how's your dad's health? And I said, he's in extremely good health for a person whose diet consists primarily of a combination of liverwurst and marzipan.
Oh, yeah.
Those are his favorite things.
Yeah.
Whereas on my mother's side, my grandmother was very good at cooking things. And I think when I was growing up, always going to her house, she would make me simple things like, cream of wheat with certain kind of brown sugar. And that was...
But no great borschts or kind of those...
I think she did some of that.
Yeah.
She was very good at cooking like brisket and things. And my mom was actually very advanced, I think. I remember when I was little... we went to this store in Westport, Connecticut, and the new rage was people eating insects. Probably,
actually, I remember chocolate-covered insects.
Yeah.
What year would that be? Like the 60s?
I think it was sort of late, late, probably around 68, 69, something like that. But then my mom was very quick to feed me steak tartare when I was a kid, And I remember just thinking, God, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Like she knew how to get the best beef, and she knew she was more sophisticated than the butcher. And I remember the butcher writing on the butcher paper when he would get her like the special high quality beef, he would write steak tata.
Tata, T-A-T-A.
Because he thought it was like a highfalutin thing. But then I remember my mom just making little pinches of it and taking a little bit of kosher salt and dropping it on there and saying, you got to try this. And it was incredible. I remember just feeling like it was this great secret that my mom had.
Yeah.
She loved food, and she made sure that I was exploring it. And I remember, friends of mine saying, like, you can't eat raw meat.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, my mom says that you can.
Did she work? Did she have a career?
Yeah, she was a writer at Time Magazine, and she was actually partners with John McPhee, who was a great writer.
Of course. Yeah.
And that was in the days when the women were called researchers and the men were called writers.
Yeah, yeah.
And then she became the film critic, working with a guy named Brad Dara, who was the unnamed Time Magazine film critic. So they used to, my mom reviewed Fellini's 8.5, which she did not like.
Did she
so
get
she
a
wrote
credit
a negative review of it. They didn't give her a byline almost ever, but over time she did start to get named, and then she was in the masthead. But also, my mom was working in the city, and I was working in the city. My dad made sure that we started working when we were like 12 years old on all summer long. I had strange jobs, but like I worked for a rare coin dealer, a numismatist on West 55th Street, where I learned everything. I mean, it was just a man with a shop who was making millions of dollars just by being smart. He knew everything about history and about Greek and Roman coins, and I was like cleaning the
what did you do?
display cases, but I was, I picked up a lot, and it was just great to have a boss and to have him tell me how you're supposed to work. And
so did you ever work in a restaurant?
I never worked in a restaurant.
That's interesting, because most Americans at some point.
My dad always, I think, wanted us to learn about business, which was strange because my sort of artistic side was always something that my mom nurtured, not my dad. And I don't think my dad ever really got it. And also my mom, I had, like, when I was kind of bumping around in the early days trying to figure out what to do, I learned that I could do magic for like children's parties.
Oh, magic.
Magic. And I could make like $35 if I went and did a birthday party. But I was only like 12 or 13 when I was doing it. So my mom had to pretend to be my assistant. And so my mom helped me take out an ad in the local paper. And she helped me like lay out the ad and put the top hat in the corner of it and give me a name. I think I was called the Conjurer Extraordinaire. And I would go to people's houses, and I would show up because they had no idea that I was 12. So I would show up for a birthday party that was going to be like 10 or 12-year-olds. And the mom would come out and she would say, "Oh, come on in. The magician will be here any minute." Oh, yes. And then I would have to go in there and like do battle with these 12-year-olds and get them interested, which I did reasonably successfully.
Who taught you the magic?
I learned it. I think I largely learned it by going to a magic shop in Manhattan called Tannen's, which had been around for many, many, many years. And it was basically like 6 or 7 magicians who would stand behind these counters, and they would just show you how to do stuff. And it figured into my life a lot because when I had made some films, then I had a business for a long time, and then I went back into filmmaking. And the first film that I made was this film called Capturing the Friedmans, which started out as a story about professional children's birthday party entertainers in New York City. Yeah. So I was kind of bringing myself back to that odd period when I was doing that as a kid. And then it became a very dark story when I kind of discovered what it was about. But it was this connection. And my mom was the person that like drove me to the, magic shows or take me to the library and let me go set up my stuff and do my thing. And she would sit me in the car and just pour out knowledge to me. Yeah. She would just tell me like every day we'd go on a drive and she'd pick something that she wanted to tell me about. Yeah. And then we had this thing I would say IO, which meant input overload. So if she was telling me stuff and it was too much and computers were just becoming a thing. So computers would choke on information. They would say input overload. So my mom would say, "If I ever tell you too much, just tell me IO, mommy." Yeah, and I did. But I learned a lot.
When she was taking you out doing this, was there somebody in the kitchen cooking? Or
my mom had kind of a partner who was an incredible Black woman from Virginia and was just a masterful cook, and made fried chicken and
Yeah.
just made so much Southern food that I became really dependent on. She just brought something to it that was like you'd walk in the kitchen and she'd be cooking it and you'd see how many pieces of chicken you could eat before she said, okay, enough. I'm putting it on the plate and I'm going to bring it out and then we're going to have dinner. But she was also a big part of my life. And I think there was a little co-parenting going on between her and my mom because my dad wasn't around all that much. So, she was there to kind of be the relief pitcher. But in the kitchen, she was incredible.
What happened when you kind of left this attentive and interesting growing up to go to, was that a big change or was it?
I was always interested in making theater, making film. And when I was in college, I directed a lot of plays.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. And then when I was getting ready to graduate, I think my dad said to me, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm going to go to Yale Drama School for directing. And he said, well, just hold on a second. Let's just talk about this. And basically said to me, all the people that we know that are artists, that are filmmakers, are often manipulated by the people that understand business. And so, you might want to consider the possibility of going to business for a couple of years and learning. If you learn what a treasury bill is and you learn how a contract gets written, then you'll be more likely to be able to do what you want. And it was a pretty persuasive argument. It was very much in his interest because he wanted me to kind of join him and thought he would eventually get my interest up in doing business.
So did you go to business school or not?
I didn't. I actually got into Harvard Business School and I went and visited and I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to do this. And ultimately, I just don't think my heart was in it. But then I came up with an idea.
What was that?
So I was trying to go to the movies one night and I was in Manhattan and I was calling my local theater and it was busy. The number was engaged because everybody calls the theater at the same time, the cinema, to go to the movies. And I by the time I got through from all the busy signals, it was maybe 8:30, and the machine told me the movie had started at 8:15. So I'd kind of sort of missed my window, and I remember sitting down and kind of sketching out what just happened to me, and why is there this multi-billion-dollar business that can't get my $7 out of my pocket, and I couldn't see the movie that I wanted to see. So I ended up starting this service called Movie Phone, which became very popular on the phone and then eventually on the internet. But there was a way to serve all those people by having a central number. So we came up with this number 777 film, and we got it in all the various area codes, and we put it out and started promoting it. Did you have to have
call centers then?
We just had, it was all totally automated. So it was never a person on the phone. It was sort of the early days of interactivity. Yeah. And so you could put in the first 3 letters of Jurassic Park. You'd put in JUR and it would say, you've selected Jurassic Park. So it was kind of like magic for the moviegoer because they thought, well, I can call this number. It's never busy. It's free. And I can, and I can go to the movies. And then I ran that business for 11 years. The last film I made was 88. And then 89, we started the business. Sold it in 99 and immediately started making Capturing the Friedmans. And then around that time, I moved to Rome with my wife and my kids. And
how many children at that point?
We have 3 now, but at that point we had 2.
Yeah.
And,
you just picked up and went to Rome. Why Rome when you were making movies in New York?
Because we had sort of sold the business and were just in a moment when we were really free to make a choice. And because our kids were growing up in the Manhattan, we just thought, I think we should get these kids and go somewhere really interesting where they're going to be welcomed and they can learn the language. And so we moved to Rome, and it was glorious. It was probably the best choice I've ever made.
How long did you live there?
2 years.
Tell me more about the food in Rome. What do you remember when you think back to those days?
I mean, I think that being in a place where you could have unlimited truffles, being in a place where you could have unlimited porcini mushrooms, being in a place where the tomatoes were so extraordinary all the time and you could have them all year. We got very hooked on, certain restaurants and...
It also teaches you a way to eat, doesn't it? It's the idea that somehow you don't think about what you're going to cook. You go to the market and you sort of say, oh, the porcini are here, so we'll have porcini, for the next week. Or we'll, the idea of kind of running around trying to find ingredients, but kind of you can just go to the market. And I think Italy is so. Where did you live?
We lived in an area called San Teodoro, which is basically between the Roman Forum and the foot of the Palatine Hill.
Yeah.
So it was really, on one side we had the Circo Massimo, where I would go running, and then the my kids would come home from school and literally go to the Roman Forum and be sitting at the Temple of Saturn, and then run around our neighborhood, which was this incredible cobblestone. And there was an extraordinary restaurant that was like half a block from our apartment, and I would go in there, and I got to know the owner, and he showed me so many things about the restaurant that I didn't know. I didn't understand that there were machines that would reduce the temperature of certain things, or that you could quickly heat or de-escalate, or there were just so many amazing techniques and things that I hadn't thought about before. I think I ended up getting very fixated on this restaurant called Da Pietro, which always had a little basket in the window that had the tartufi bianchi, had the porcini mushrooms, had this incredible access to just great produce.
Get out of here.
Look who just showed up. It's Fisher Stevens.
Andrew the Great Jarecki.
You introduced us. So, but there's so much to talk about. All right, so we're here. We've been talking about food. So if we think about food as also giving us comfort, is there a food that you would go to that would be a comfort to you?
Yeah, I think so. My best friend's grandmother used to, the day after Thanksgiving, make white toast with stuffing, cranberry sauce, turkey, and tomato sandwich.
Do you make it sometimes?
I do.
Do you only make it at Thanksgiving, or you do it with turkey?
I do it. Sometimes I just do it when I need to feel that feeling.
You talk about food and movies and
Pasta,
film
pesto.
and what he's done.
Yeah.
This film is so important to all of us, and thank you for making it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So it's good.
Thank you
a beautiful
for
place to
inviting
be
me here to the River Cafe.
Let's
Andrew,
go have
for your
something
film.
to eat. Yeah.
It is a
Gotta
great
go.
film.
Ruthie's Table 4 was produced by Alex Bell and Zad Rogers, with Robbie Hamilton, Andrew Sang, and Bella Cellini. This has been an Atomized production for iHeart Media.